Hi and welcome to another programming lesson here at Red Gaming Tech. I'm the Kid. So in this lesson we're going to get slightly more advanced. We're going to be working on a program with multiple classes within it that kind of interact with each other. So to give you a breakdown of what we're actually doing this lesson, I'll run the actual project first and show you what it does. So we're back to a console application, and we just have a very simple program that is handling. Essentially, we've got a scene here. And in this scene there is a wizard, who is you, and there is a shop. And you can see what the shop has in its inventory, and you can see what you have in your inventory, and you can buy things from the shop. So, the first thing you're asked to do is to name your wizard, so I'll just call him Spunty. Excuse me. So once you enter your name, it takes that name and enters it into a variable, so we get Spunty arrives at a shop, weary from battle. He's battered and bruised, but decides to buy some schlock for some reason. Press any key. Okay. So this is the kind of meat and potatoes of the program. So we have the shop called Dave's Schlock Emporium. It has 500 money, and in its inventory, the inventory of the wizard and the shop in this instance consists of 10 slots, so they can hold 10 things at once. So at the moment the shop has a potion, a staff, a burger, another burger, and the rest is nothing. And at the moment Spunty has 100 money, 68 health, 81 mana, and in his inventory he has 10 empty slots. So the program will ask you, what does Spunty want to buy? We want to buy, say number 1, we'll buy a potion. So now you'll notice that the shop no longer has the potion in its inventory, but Spunty does, and also he's lost 60 money, which is the price of the potion. If I try and buy another potion, it'll tell me Dave's Schlock Emporium doesn't have that. I'm trying to buy something that the shop doesn't have. But what I can do, for example, is buy a burger. And you'll notice that now the shop only has 1 burger left, and now Spunty has a burger. He also now only has 20 money, so it's subtracted the price of the burger, and his health and his mana remain unchanged. In this program, they remain unchanged at all times. There's no point in the program that they ever get altered. Now, the last item we can try and buy is the staff. But now we're getting the message Spunty can't afford that, so Spunty doesn't have enough money to be able to buy this staff from the shop. He can buy the other burger, but he now has 0 money, but he does have the 2 burgers and a potion, and he's reduced to 0 money. Okay, so that's essentially what the program does. It's just showing an interaction between 2 classes. So the first class is our wizard, the second class is our shop. So let's take a look at the code. So we start out, we've got our namespace called class interaction. Within that namespace there are several classes. The first one is the actual program itself, has its own class and a main function, which is the entry point to the program. We covered that either in the first or the second lesson, program entry points. So we have the program class, which contains this main function, which is, as it sounds, the main function of the program. So this is where everything that's going to happen while this program is running sits in there, and it ends here. So we've now declared another class, and this class is called item. So an item class, or an instance of an item, contains a string that defines its name and an integer that decides how much it costs. And then we have the constructor. So for constructors, I think that's either lesson 3 or 4. I'm getting a bit lost in lesson numbers, but I'm getting tongue-tied. In the lesson where we looked at classes, we also looked at constructors and destructors. So you may have to go back and watch that video if you aren't too sure on that. So this is the item class's constructor. It takes 2 arguments. It takes a string called name and an integer called price. And then all that happens in the constructor is it takes the name string that was fed in and assigns it to this object's name, which is here. And then it takes that price integer that was fed in and assigns it to this object's price variable, which is there. So the item class is a very simple class. All it does is have a name and a price. Now we have the class wizard, which is the class that Spunty, our wizard that we named, is an instance of. So wizards within this program have a string that defines their name, an integer that defines their mana, an integer that defines their health, an integer that defines their money, and then we did arrays again. Arrays are a thing we did a few lessons back. But in this instance we have an array of items. So we have an array of objects of type item. And we haven't defined how many there are, we've just said that an array exists So a set of items, a set of objects of type item exists, and we're going to call this set inventory. So we have the Wizards Constructor up next, and all the constructor takes is a string that tells us what the wizard's name is. And within the constructor, it takes that name we gave it and assigns it to this object's name variable, which is up here. It's highlighted it for you. Next, it sets its health variable to 68, its mana to 81, and its money to 100. So it just initializes some values there. And then it takes the inventory. Remember, we made that array called the array of items called inventory. It takes that, and for each and essentially it creates 10 locations within that group. So it creates 10 blank objects of class item and puts them within that set. So we're saying here we said there exists an array and it's called this. Here we're telling it how many locations there are in that array, in this case 10. And then we need to do something. We need to initialize the objects within that array. So we'll set a for loop that's going to iterate 10 times, and on each time the location in inventory of number equal to count, which starts at 0. On each iteration it increases by 1, so it's going to count up through 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it's going to, to each location, it's going to create a new instance of class item, and it's going to pass to its constructor the string nothing and the number 0. So we're filling up this set of items with essentially blank items that cost nothing and are just called nothing. And the reason we give it those two arguments to its constructor is because up here in the item class we've said that the constructor needs 2 arguments. So moving on from there, we've now initialized its inventory. So next thing we need to do is add a function that will allow us to add an item to the wizard's inventory. So what we're going to do is we're going to say this function takes an argument, and the argument it needs is an object of type item, which we're going to call new item. And then what it's going to do is, as we did before, it's going to iterate over the inventory, and it's going to say if the current location I'm looking at, so the location number count, its name variable is equal to nothing. So if there's nothing in that slot, then we're going to put new item into that slot, and we're going to break out of this loop. We've put it in the inventory, we don't need to do anything else. The break command will always break out of any loop that you're currently in. So in this case, it will break out of this for loop. Next, we're going to declare a function that allows us to remove an item from the wizard's inventory. And it's called remove from inventory. And it takes an argument of type item, which we're going to call new item. So what we're going to do here is iterate over that inventory array again. And we're going to say if the current inventory location we're looking at, if its name is the same as new item's name, then we're going to overwrite what's in that location with an item called nothing that costs 0. So we're going to set it to just a null object again. And then we're going to break out this loop. We only need to remove it once. We don't want to remove, say we have multiple of that item in the inventory array, we don't want to remove all of them. We just want to find the first one and remove it. So next we're going to declare another function for the wizard called buy. And that is going to take 2 arguments. It's going to take an argument of type item called new item, and an argument of type shop. Now this is a class that's further down in the program, which we're going to look at in a minute, but we'll just bear with me on that. It's going to take an argument of type shop, and we're going to call it shop. So what we're going to do within that function is we're going to declare an integer called shop check iterator. Don't worry too much about the name of that. When I was naming it, I couldn't think of a decent name to give it, so I just slapped a random piece of crap in there. But what we're actually using that for is to determine when we've checked every location in the shop's inventory. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create another loop, iterate over the inventory, and we're going to say if the shop's inventory, the item at this location's name is the same as new item's name, then we're going to the shop check iterator checks whether the shop actually has that item. So if it finds an item that has the same name as the item we're requesting in the inventory, then it'll add 1 to shop check iterator to confirm that it does have that item. If the shop check iterator is 0 at the end of iterating over the shop's inventory, we're going to output sorry, the shop doesn't have that, because we didn't find any items matching the name that we're trying to buy. So we'll just say it doesn't have that. If it isn't equal to 1, so else, we're going to iterate over it again. And then we're going to iterate over the wizard's inventory, and what we're doing, iterating over all the 10 of the locations. And if we find a location that has nothing in it, or has an item called nothing in it, and we want to check if the wizard, if this dot money is greater than the new item's price variable, so can we afford it? If we have more money than that item's price, we're going to add it to our inventory with our add to inventory function. So what we'll do is call out to that add to inventory function and pass it new item. So we're going to pass an object of type item called new item, which was fed into this function at the top here. We're going to pass that to the add to inventory function, and it will be added to the wizard's inventory. We're just going to take the price of that item out of our money, and then we need to call shop's remove from inventory function. We want to remove from its inventory this item, the item that we're currently working with, and then break. If we have less money, so else if the wizard's money value is less than the new item's price, it's just going to output a message saying, sorry, you can't afford that. The reason it's got this .name here is because it's going to call the wizard whatever you named it at the start, and then it's going to break out. And the final function within wizard is a function called output inventory, and it doesn't take any arguments, so we can just call it by saying literally that, just output inventory bracket bracket. It doesn't need any arguments. And all this function does is iterates over the inventory again using the counter, which we've looked at in previous lessons, and for each one it's going to output the name of what's in that inventory location. The second class we're looking at is called shop. So again, it's similar to, in fact, the shop is actually quite similar to the wizard. In this case, I could have actually had it so that the shop inherited from the wizard, but I wanted to give two more distinct classes than one that inherits from another, just to give you a demonstration of a simpler form of class interaction. So we've got two distinctly different classes, even though they do essentially the same thing. So the shop has a name. It also has an integer that defines how much money it has. And again, it has an array of objects of type item, which we're going to call inventory. Now in the shop's constructor, we're going to set the shop's name to Dave's Schlock Emporium. And we're going to say that it has 500 money. Its money variable is equal to 500. And we're going to initialize its inventory with 10 objects of type item. And we're going to iterate over it, as we have been multiple times in this program, and we're just going to fill each location with a new item called nothing that costs nothing. So next, the next function is going to be add to inventory, which is a function that our wizard class also has, and this works almost exactly the same as the wizards. It takes an argument of type item, so what item is it we want to be working with, and we're going to iterate over our inventory, find the first location where there's a nothing in that slot, and then we're just going to put this new item into that slot and break out of the function. Same for remove from inventory. Takes one argument, which is the name of the item or the item that we want to manipulate within this inventory. Iterate over our inventory. If it finds an item that matches the name we gave it in this argument, it's just going to replace it with a new item that's called nothing and costs nothing, and then break out of the function. And the shop also has an output inventory function. And all it does is iterate over the inventory and output the name of the item in each slot. So that is the actual main body of this program, where we've declared our classes and their functionality and their variables. So now we want to come up to our main function, and we can actually do some things with these classes. So initially what we want to do is, first thing we would do when our console's blank is output the line name thine wizard. And it's just going to output a blank line just to make formatting a bit tidier. And then we're saying that there's a string called name, and it's going to be equal to whatever's returned by console.readline. Now the console.readline function, all it will do is wait for you to input something, namely a string. It will wait for you to input a string. Then when you hit enter, that function will return whatever it is you typed in. And we're going to take the string that it returns and assign it to a string called name. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create our wizard object. So we're going to say it's an object of type wizard. We're going to call it wizard1, and we're going to create a new, and we're going to say this wizard is equal to a new wizard. So we're going to invoke the wizards constructor, and to the constructor we're going to pass a string, which is name. We're going to pass name to its constructor. As you can see in the Wizards constructor down here, it does actually expect a string, which is why we have to pass it that. And what that's going to do is assign the name you gave it to the name variable of wizard1. So now we're going to create a new shop. So we're saying there's an object of type shop. We're going to call it shop1, and we're going to invoke the shops constructor just to get that shop set up. Then we're going to create some items. We're going to create 3 items here. So we've declared 3 different objects of type item. They're called item 1, item 2, and item 3. And for each one, we're going to call items constructor, and we're going to pass it the name of the item and item's price, because in the item class, within its constructor, we have declared that it requires 2 arguments. If you try and invoke it but don't pass it those arguments, you'll get an error message back saying item.
Avast virus database has been updated.
Okay, that's good to know. So if you try and do it try and instantiate an item without passing it the correct number of arguments, it will say that item contains no constructor that takes that number of arguments. You can have multiple constructors within a class for different situations, but I'm going to come on to that somewhere down the line. So we now have 3 items with different names and different prices. Now what we're going to do is call shop1's add to inventory function 4 times, and each time we're going to pass it one of these items. So we're going to pass it item 1, item 2, and item 3, and then we're going to pass it item 3 again. So if you look at the shop's add to inventory function, here we go, it takes 1 argument of type item. So when we're actually calling that function, we have to give it 1 argument of type item. So we're going to pass it item 1, which is an object of type item, and we're going to run the add to inventory function of shop1, and that will add it to its inventory. And we're doing that 4 times with 4 different, well actually 3 items, and 1 item we're putting 2 in the inventory. And then we're going to call console.clear, and all that does is just clear the console to black, so you get a fresh screen. Just a way of keeping things a bit tidier and making your formatting a bit nicer. So then we're going to output some text, and we're going to say wizard1.name, so whatever is in wizard1's name variable, which we set up here, where we did string.name and this is where we were setting the name variable of wizard. We're going to output that, and then we're going to say arrives at a shop weary from battle. On a new line, we're going to say all of this. And then we're going to output a blank line, and then we're going to output press any key, and we're just going to call console.readline, so it'll wait for a key press. Then we're actually going to enter a loop. Now, technically a while true loop, which is what we're doing here, is an infinite loop, which is something you don't ideally want to do, but there are correct ways that it can be used. So what a while true loop will do is it will just loop over this block of code endlessly until this becomes false, and that will become false when you break from the loop. So essentially it'll keep iterating over it indefinitely until you give it a reason to break out of it. So in this case I'm going to show you where we do actually give it that condition where it will break out of it. So on each iteration it's going to clear the console, output shop1's name, say shop1 has this much money, so it's going to output its money variable, and then it's going to add a blank line, and then it's going to call shop1's output inventory function, which we saw below just iterates over its inventory and outputs the name of each item. We're going to insert another blank line, then we're going to say wizard1.name, so the name of the wizard has, then we're going to output its money variable, has this much money, and its health, we're going to output its health variable here, and we're going to output its mana variable here, as well as, which we're going to output there, and then it's going to put another blank line and call the wizard's output inventory function, which is exactly the same as the shop's one. We're going to output another blank line, and we're going to ask, what will the wizard buy? Something I should explain here actually is when you're doing a console.write line, if you want to, in the middle of a line, output some variable or some other piece of information that you're not directly typing in, you type your string, and then you put your second bracket, and then you do a plus, and then the variable you want to output, then another plus if you want to add more afterwards, and then put another, I think they're called parentheses. That's how you output variables within a console.write or console.write line. So then we're just going to output another blank line, and we're going to give the player 3 options. Option 1 is for a potion, option 2 is to buy a staff, and option 3 is to buy a burger. We're going to output another blank line just for formatting. We're going to create a new string called option, and its value is going to be whatever's returned by this console.readline call. So whatever the player types in, option's value will be equal to that. Then we're going to invoke a switch statement on option. Now there is a little thing that I left out when I was coding this up, which I'm going to add in because it's a very important thing when you're using a switch statement, but I'll come to that in just a sec. So we're going to create a switch statement, and we're going to be looking at the option variable. And we're going to say in the case that the option is equal to 1, so that the player's typed 1, we're going to call the Wizards buy function, and he's going to buy item 1 from shop 1. Because the Wizards buy function takes 2 arguments. What is it you're buying, which item are you buying, and which shop are you going to buy it from. So what we're saying here within our switch statement, if I can find it again, is we want to buy item 1 from shop 1. And then we'll just break out. So what that will do is break the while true loop. In the case that the player's entered 2, we want to buy item 2 from shop 1, and then break the loop. And in case they typed in 3, we want to buy item 3 from shop 1, and then break the loop. In the event that the player has typed exit, because we want to have a way to actually exit the program, all we do is call environment.exit0, and that will just close the application down, and then we'll break this loop as well. Because every case in a switch statement has to contain a break. You can't cascade down multiple cases, it won't allow you to do that. But something you also have to do, well, just it's good practice to do within a switch statement, is to declare a default. And what that's going to do is going to say if none of these cases match, do this. And we're going to say console.writeline and then we are going to break at this point. So see, if whatever the value in option is doesn't match any of these cases, just do this. So this is what's called the default response, or the default function of a switch statement. Right, so that's kind of been a rundown of how the program works. So now that we've looked through it, let's actually run it, and we can look at it step by step. So for this program, I'm having to really maximize the console, because otherwise things get cut off, because it's quite a meaty load of text that comes out of the program. So as we saw in our code, it's going to ask us first to name the wizard, and we'll call him Josh. And it's going to output our little bit of story for this scene. So Josh arrives at a shop, weary from battle. He's battered and bruised, but decides to buy some schlock for some reason. Press any key. So now we've entered the while true loop. It's going to output our text. Dave's Schlock Emporium has 500 money, and then this is what the output from the output inventory command of the shop, Dave's Schlock Emporium. And it's going to say Josh has 100 money, 68 health, and 81 mana, as well as, and then it's going to call its output inventory function. Obviously it's got nothing in its inventory at the moment, and it's going to say what will Josh buy? And this is where we get our 3 options. So this is where we're taking in that option variable, and we're going to run our switch statement. So I'm going to say first that I want number 1, which is a potion. So it's now deducted 60 from Josh's money, which is the price variable of item 1, which is the potion, and it's now in his inventory. So it's called his buy function, which in kind of a chain reaction has caused this add to inventory function, and it has called the shop's remove from inventory function. It creates kind of a cascade down the functions. And the result is that Josh now has a potion in his inventory, and the Schlock Emporium doesn't. So if I try and buy it again, it'll say, sorry, he doesn't have that. If I type in something that isn't any of these options, if I type in J, the loop's already restarting before it's outputting it. Never mind. It's breaking from the while true loop and restarting it. Don't worry, I did that wrong. But it is good practice to have a default declaration in a switch statement just to catch unexpected input. Because if I don't, actually I'll show you, if I don't have that default statement, we should get some kind of unhandled exception. Why did it? So if I say I'm 3, oh, it's because that the output there is within a different function. Never mind. So let's just get rid of this default thing. basically the reason it's not outputting this hut is because I'm clearing the console too quickly for it to be actually be output. Because as soon as we write huh, it jumps back to the start of the while true loop, and there's a console.clear. Cool. So it's clearing it, so it's there so momentarily that you wouldn't see it. If I get rid of that default command, they may have made C# smarter now, where it will make an assumption of what to do in case of a default, but let's find out. I'm going to call our wizard P. So let's try typing H. Oh, it will actually handle a switch statement without a default nowadays. It just carries on as if nothing happened. Okay, that didn't used to happen. What used to happen is that would throw what's called an unhandled exception. So essentially it's saying, I don't know, what am I supposed to be doing here? You haven't told me what to do in this situation. So that's why it's always prudent to put a default command within a switch statement. So we'll buy that potion, and we'll buy that staff, but P can't afford the staff now that he's bought the potion. So we'll just buy the 2 hamburgers or the 2 burgers instead. So P's now spent all of his money, still got his health and his mana, and he now has a potion and 2 burgers, while the shop now just has its staff remaining. If we try and buy it, sorry, we can't afford that. So that's really the extent of this scene. It's very, not exactly thrilling, but that is what it does. So really, this lesson is just an example of interaction between classes and how you can call their functions from other classes depending on security level. Remember when we were looking at classes initially, we looked at security level, but I've made everything public for this example. Security levels are something we'll go into a bit more in depth when we start doing some more exciting things than messing with wizards in shops. Right, so that I'm probably going to call that a lesson. So as usual, if you've got any questions, post them in the comments or post them to our Facebook group. Just start it with @thekid, so I know you're talking to me and I'll get back to you, or just post it in the comments. I tend to check these pretty regularly. Before I go, a little bit off topic. I don't know if you remember, a few months ago now, I talked to Amata about a game I was working on that was called Splooge at the time. Splooge is something I'm still working on. I'm working on it in Unity, and I can actually show you it. So obviously it's designed to run on Android phones, so it doesn't look too exciting in Windows. The game is no longer called Splooge. The game is now called Gumball Tumble. It's probably going to be out within a few weeks with any luck, but I'll just show you what the game looks like now, because it's changed drastically in visual style from when I showed the kind of pre-alpha to Amata, and it was looking pretty rough. So this is what the game looks like now. So this is our prototype title screen. So we've got an option for start, credits, and exit. So it's actually built for a touch screen, but I've actually added in some keyboard controls just for debugging purposes. Excuse me. So let's go ahead and start the game. There is actually music in the game, but I've turned it off for now. So the actual idea of the game remains the same. It's about colouring in the little pellets as they drop down. So what's going to happen is it's going to ask for a particular colour up the top, and it's going to tell us what the next 2 it's going to want after that are as well. And all we have to do is colour in the pellets to match that pattern. And then you'll notice they're stacking up on the left. And what's going to happen is the pellets are going to come faster and faster and closer together, and essentially it's up to the player to keep up with them. So we're currently on level 1, so it's still pretty slow and tame, but things will ramp up. You notice they're still stacking up on the left. Wants a rainbow this time. And next is a purple. And then it wants 2 reds, and that's actually going to finish that stack on the left, which will then advance us to level 2, where the pellets will start getting slightly faster. It does take a little while for the pellets to become worryingly fast, but it does ramp up slowly with each level. And really the game's just about getting a high score and lasting as long as possible, and then you'll be able to post that to Facebook or whatever, share it with your friends, things like that. So really it's a very simple game, but the idea is that it starts out easy, but as you go further and further along the game it gets harder and harder to stay in the game, and that's essentially where we're at the moment with that. You'll notice at the bottom in my little debug console I'm actually getting some exceptions happening at the moment. That's actually a bug I'm still dealing with. Basically, it's caused by something that you probably don't care about. It within the code. I know what it is. I just need to get in there and fix it. So let's maybe look at where the game's at now, just to give you an update on that. Right, so this has been another lesson with me, the kid at Red Gaming Tech. Thanks for watching. Post any questions you have in any of the aforementioned places, and I'll be sure to get back to you. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys either in Duke or another programming lesson, whichever comes first.